Here's an idea. Take the most powerful being in the Marvel Universe, have him save the world, and then betray him by sending him deep into space. That should work out for everybody, right? On this episode of Moving Panels, we discuss Planet Hulk. Welcome to Moving Panels, the podcast where we discuss movies and TV shows based on, inspired by, and adapted from the world of comic books. I'm your host, Laramy Wells, and joining me today is Chad Smith. How are you, Chad?
Doing pretty good, Laramy. Very excited to talk about this. One of my favorite properties.
Yeah, this is one that you and I, we've been planning this one for, 3-4 months?
Something like that. Yeah, to shamelessly plug Amazon Prime. Ever since I found they have a ton of things that you can just read for free, and I had reread it, and I was like, we got to do this, Laramy. And
then I sat and reread it. Actually, I read it. That was actually my first time ever reading.
Oh yeah,
reading it. So I read through it, and then we finally have been able to get together to record an episode on it. So here we are. We're talking about Planet Hulk. The movie, of course, is our main focus. Was released February 2nd of 2010, but it is based on the comic book storyline of the same name. The storylines of the same name from 2000. It was a 2006-2007 run that stretched over those 2 years. It was of Marvel's big animated movies. It was their seventh animated movie, and I gotta tell you, Marvel didn't get off to a good start with their animated movies. If you ask me, the Invincible Iron Man and the Doctor Strange animated movies, which I think came before this, they weren't great to me. So it was good to see this one.
As much of a Marvel guy as I am, I think even post this movie, their animated stuff is not very good. It's not comparable to DC, so it's kind of the one exception where they flip the script. So
yeah, and the cover art, which was actually an Alex Ross piece of artwork, it's amazing. I love that artwork.
Yes, yeah. The artwork, which I'm sure we'll talk about in the one-off on the one shot on this, but total inspiration for the Hulk in Ragnarok. So
Chad and I are going to do kind of a back-to-back episode here. We're going to do this full episode as a review of the animated movie Planet Hulk, but considering that this story was also adapted into Thor Ragnarok, we're going to focus on a one-shot that'll come next week in which we talk about how well they did integrating this story into the Thor Ragnarok movie. But this episode is just entirely about the animated movie and how that connects, which connects a heck of a lot better to the source material than Thor Ragnarok obviously does.
Oh, yeah.
All right, so let's get into the characters. Obviously, we've got to start with the Hulk. This is one of our first times really getting to focus on the Hulk, and probably one of the rare times we get to focus on the Hulk. The Hulk, of course, debuted in The Incredible Hulk #1 back in May of 1962, infamously created by Stan Lee and Jack Kirby, one of their great collaborations to create this iconic character. In the animated movie, he is voiced by Rick Wasserman, I think is how you'll pronounce his last name. I'm not sure why they didn't use Fred Tatasciore, who is usually the voice of the Hulk for most of the animated stuff.
Well, to be fair, he might have been recording one of his 1,300 other projects that he's always working on, so they might have not just been able to get him. I don't know. I kind of like... I don't know. You can go either way with this one, but I like his take. He's just gruffer, darker. This is definitely a Hulk that has more things to smash, less things to say, so... I kind of like that.
Yeah, especially, and we'll get into this in the moving panel section, especially when you're talking about the comic book connection.
Yeah.
This is a much darker, but we'll get into more about the Hulk since it all centers around him. So we'll move on. In terms of the other characters, there's not much to give in terms of background because they were all introduced in this story.
Right.
Yeah, these aren't characters that really have a long lineage of comic books. A couple of different connections we'll get to. All right, so let's get into the other characters, and we'll start off with probably the second biggest character out of this, and that's Kiara, voiced by Lisa Ann Beeley. Again, always guessing how you pronounce some of these last names. Of course, her character is the Red King Shadow Warrior, We get to see really her entire story in this movie. We get to find out why she's the Shadow Warrior.
Well, not her entire story.
True. Because, in the comic books, we do get to see the end of her story.
Yeah. Her whole arc happens in the comics, so...
Yeah, which we don't see in this one. This one ends a little early and compared to the comics. But, of course, she's equal, you would almost say, to Hulk. She sees Hulk as a worthy adversary, and Hulk, of course, is... of course, more so in the comics, very interested in her in terms of her strength and her ability. And
and honestly, that's kind of the one thing where the movie falls a little bit short. And I get it, like, it's an hour and 20 minutes. You're only going to pack so much in, but I don't understand why Hulk is attracted to her in the movie. If you haven't read the comic, you kind of go, all right, that sort of happened fast. And it just turns into a creepy, like, oh, she's strong kind of thing. So, it's like, all right, that's a little odd, but sure. She has some of the best visual scenes in the movie, though. The fight scenes in this movie are phenomenal, but I would argue that probably the best single shot scene in the entire movie is when it's their one-on-one and she ditches her weapon and challenges him in the old way and all this kind of stuff, and she punches him straight in the chest, like almost inserting her fingers like a knife into the center of his chest, and the impact and like the flex of his chest and the whole 9 yards. It's an incredible scene. It's one of my favorite parts of the movie. But she's a great counterbalance, whatever you want to call what her character kind of is for Hulk on this planet. And I agree with you. I don't know what else to say to that. I think it's also cool. You can kind of go from her into just the whole mythology that Greg Pak writes in the series, because he gets to make up an entire world literally with this. And so you have, the planet Sakaar, which Hulk has been, it wasn't where he was supposed to be banished to, but it's where he winds up. And you have these 3 alien races, and she represents the one called the Shadow People. And she's, he even gets to make up a mythology inside of that. They're this kind of spiritual, prophetic people, and she's this like ancient power inside of their society called the Old Strong. And so, that it's pretty interesting, and I think it's well written in the sense that she's originally the not the antagonist, because the Red King is clearly the bad guy, but she has to play the
main henchman.
Yeah, and the moral, ethical, like, who do I side with where kind of stuff. So she has an interesting arc.
Yeah, where her loyalties lie. Does she follow? Which is always, usually it's the basis of a bad, like, movie, is when it starts off going like, legend foretells of an ancient warrior.
Yeah.
Movie ever starts off about some prophecy or something, you immediately go, oh, this is not going to be good. And of course, that's exactly what this story is. I mean, Hulk comes in and he's fulfilling a prophecy, and she fulfills that prophecy of being the Old Strong, which, correct me if I'm wrong, that just is because her skin is indestructible, right?
I think there's more to it than just that. You don't see the like super strength that she possesses and all that sort of stuff with the other people of the Shadow People. And in the books, she even has to be kind of installed into that position, and there's some controversy over that. It's this whole weird,
some politics involved.
Yeah, it's pretty neat, but which of course they skipped over for the movie, which honestly doesn't take anything away from it. But
yeah, that wasn't a big change. But we just mentioned the Red King. The Red King in this, voiced by Mark Hildreth. He is a voice actor, but I did recognize him as from being a sci-fi buff as well. He was in the reboot of V, as well as on the short-lived show Resurrection. Can't say he's had a very successful acting career, if you know those two shows, but he is a voice actor. I found it interesting, the twist, going back to Kiera, that in the movie, it ultimately ends up that she infects him with the spikes.
Yeah. Instead of the Hulk beating him within an inch of his life.
Beating the snot out of him, yeah. And then, of course, throws them to the Wildabots, which aren't even in
they
the
kind of
movie.
they let that whole thing go altogether for the movie. But yeah, I don't know. I don't know if I dislike his performance or if I just dislike the character and therefore kind of dislike his performance. I don't know if it's one of those like Joffrey moments where you just hate him because of his character, but I don't know. I don't want to be too critical of somebody, but this is probably, in my opinion, the weakest performance of the show. You just never get an idea of why he's evil. There's zero background to the Red King. You don't get any kind of why he is doing what he's doing. He's just, chaotic evil, and that's pretty much it. So I do like the books a lot better with this particular character.
Yeah, they really just portray him as he's just the power-hungry leader who has to do whatever he has to do to maintain order and power, and again, just that political nature, and the aristocrat, whatever you want to call it. You're talking about he was your least favorite performance. Let me move that into the character that I thought got the least amount of treatment, and that's Hiram. You pronounce it for me,
Hiram,
Chad.
Yeah,
Hiram. There you go.
Yeah.
And again, this is where I say he has the least amount, because I don't even remember them saying his name an awful lot.
Yeah, he gets pretty passed over and has a much, much bigger role as kind of the carrier of the prophecy and all that sort of stuff in the book, and that is way downplayed, even though the movie kind of opens with it, with the whole prophetic sequence, and then just we'll just kind of pass over that a little bit. Yeah, I'd agree with that. He's not. I honestly, almost all of the warbound don't get great treatment in this movie, even though, again, like overall, I do like the adaptation. Understand it's only an hour and 20 minutes, but he gets kind of shafted. Not a lot of stuff going on with him. I think he's kind of there to make sure that they have a shadow person along with Hulk from the get-go. Because other than that, he doesn't play much of a role.
Yeah, he and you might have to help me pronounce her name too, but was it Eloise? Eloise, yeah.
Yeah. Well, she kind of doesn't want to join at first, so he's, he does get to play that little bit of a part that with, now I can't remember, what is it, Landis, the general that she's following to try to overthrow the Red King. He dies very quickly, so there's not a lot with him, but yeah, Eloise also not horribly well fleshed out in the movie. You don't get nearly the backstory and the why she is rebelling against the Red King that you get in the books. You just kind of know that that's her role in this. She's an aristocrat who is rebelling against the throne. She's trying very hard to overthrow the Red King, and she's not very wise about it, so gets them into a lot of trouble.
Yeah, again, like you said, the side characters are so much bigger in the comic, and there's so much importance to them in the comics,
right?
That this movie just really focuses on Hulk.
Yeah,
and that's all they really care about.
You have Meek, who I think gets treated the worst, honestly, because he's not even really in character. He's a coward in the movie. He's just he spends the entire movie going, I'm a hider, not a fighter, and then at the end he's a fighter now. So, has a little bit of a redemptive arc, but far more,
but not like in the comics. Yeah,
in the comic, and really has a great run there. And you totally miss out on his relationship to his people that are just always called the natives, which is a little strange, but the ant people of Sakaar, and apparently they can not telepathically talk, but like pheromone talk, like real insects on Earth, and it really explores that, and it's a pretty fascinating series of events. He actually saves Sakaar at one point. You don't get any of that in the movie, unfortunately. But he is the representative of the natives on our little band of brothers here.
Yeah, because they even, at one point, if I'm remembering right, in the comic, like, he is even believed to be the savior of the planet that they thought Hulk was going to be. and all that.
Yeah, well, yeah, and which is I'm trying to remember. Is that why he is cast out, or I can't remember. I can't remember that portion of the story.
Yeah, I just remember he kind of becomes, like you said, the leader, like almost like the king of the natives.
Right.
Much bigger part in the story. Of course, we also got Korg, which most people will remember from Thor Ragnarok and into Avengers Endgame, and all that. Remember a little bit more of Korg. Korg, of course, is more of not as much of a comedic character as he is in the comic. Voiced by great voice actor Kevin Michael Richardson.
Yep.
You talked about Fred Tatasciore earlier. Kevin Michael Richardson, I mean, Simpsons, Family Guy, American Dad. He was the Joker on the Batman series from the early 2000s. Not Batman animated series, the one that followed.
Yeah.
The Joker that had like the straight jacket on.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
The crazy hair. Yeah, that was Kevin Michael Richardson. Of course, he is a Cronin, probably the only character or alien race we had seen prior to this storyline, because the Cronin was actually the first alien race that Thor encountered in his very first comic.
I was about to say, it's an interesting tie-in. I thought this was kind of clever, so I guess you kind of throw in the last character we need to talk about. So in the movie, you have Beta Ray Bill. In the comics, it's Silver Surfer. But Beta Ray Bill gets his intro through Korg, and they use, what was it? I'm trying to remember the comic. Something of Mystery. What's the name of that comic? It's Journey into Mystery.
The Journey into Mystery.
Journey into Mystery, 83, the first appearance of Thor. The Cronins of Saturn.
Of Saturn, that was the thing. They're actually... They're from Saturn in the original comic.
Yeah, and so that's where Korg is originally introduced into the comics along with Thor. And so they very cleverly, because they couldn't use Silver Surfer because he was tied up with Fox properties, so they brought in Beta Ray Bill instead, which is actually super interesting. I would bet it's probably 50% or better of the audience's first time ever encountering Beta Ray Bill. He's a fairly obscure Marvel character, but he's pretty interesting. So it was kind of cool that you get to see that backstory too. And so I liked that part, that they used a little bit of a legal problem to create a nice little tie-in and give Korg a more rounded story. In the books, he's basically Hulk's right-hand man, which you don't get in the movie again. He's arguably the most prominent because they use him to defeat the other Cronins that are turned in the first fight in the arena. So he carries maybe a little bit bigger role, but he's very important to Hulk's group in the books, and you don't get nearly as much of that. But I do like the little tie-in they gave him, at least.
I agree 100%. Although, wasn't it when they redid the backstory? Wasn't it that instead of the Cronins invading Earth, wasn't it that Beta Ray Bill invaded, or Beta Ray Bill and Thor came to their planet?
No, I don't think it's their planet. They were on a mission to... It wasn't Earth. Anyways, you're right in that sense.
Earth.
They were scouting some other world, and so apparently, the 911 call went out, and Thor and Beta Ray Bill show up and absolutely, destroy the Cronins. But it's a cool. I wouldn't call it a throwaway scene, but it's a neat little scene to kind of tie them in. So Beta Ray Bill, if we're going to jump into that character real quick,
sure,
is probably my biggest issue with the movie. You get zero reason why he's there. Apparently, the Red King just captured him. Yeah, I mean, he captured the Hulk same way. Okay, cool, whatever. But in a great fight scene where you have the Hulk versus Beta Ray Bill, the Hulk, maybe accidentally, I don't know, it's not really clear, destroys the little mind control device that's been installed on all of them, but destroys the one that's on Beta Ray Bill. So now Beta Ray Bill gets the opportunity to use his overwhelming Thor powers to destroy everyone else's device and free the people, and then he just flies off. he starts a race war on an alien world, and then he's like, "Deuces, I'm gone." So he just flies off into space, and that's probably my only real complaint with this movie, like plot wise. I was kind of like, "Oh, that's super heroic. Just you're all now free. I'm out." Like, doesn't do anything else. So it's a strange little cameo.
I mean, if I remember right, Silver Surfer does a very similar thing in the comic, doesn't he?
Okay, but I would argue that that's pretty Silver Surfer-y. Like, that's kind of who that dude is. Like, he shows up, does things, and then, very, I don't know how to describe it, but very, like, surfer mentality is just kind of off to his next cosmic thing that he does. And so I don't know why, but I buy it more with the Surfer than I do with Beta Ray Bill.
Well, for those who are not familiar with Beta Ray Bill, so Beta Ray Bill always kind of gets this, I guess the best way to visualize him is usually said is he looks like he's a horse.
Horse face.
A human horse.
Yeah.
First appeared in The Mighty Thor number 337 in November of 1983. He is a Corbinite, is the name of his race. He was a protector of that race and actually fought off Thor without any Thor with his Mjolnir and everything. Beta Ray Bill was actually able to pretty much fight Thor to a draw.
Yeah.
And then was able to lift Mjolnir.
Yeah.
And in return, Odin, because Beta Ray Bill showed his worthiness, Odin actually created Stormbreaker, which people who are familiar with Avengers Endgame remember the axe-looking hammer that Thor gets. That's actually Beta Ray Bill's weapon. And so he gets that, and he's now this horse-faced Thor. It could be worse. He could be Throg, and we could have had Throg.
Yeah, you're right. And he basically has the same powers as Thor, minus the arrogance. So, there's that.
Yeah. Yeah.
But anyway.
I don't know why I mentioned Throg. If you don't know who Throg is, he's the frog Thor.
Yep.
Who picks up a small, like a chip of Mjolnir and then gets Thor's abilities. And you think, well, that's ridiculous. It's canon. I mean...
Well, let's be honest. I mean, the whole Thor line is, Stan Lee and company doing drugs in the 60s. So, I mean, come on. It's...
Here's a character that I want to point out. I didn't know whether to put him here with the characters or talk about it in the moving panels, but whole character completely missing from the movie, and that's Brood.
So interestingly, I assumed that was also like a Fox property issue, because the Brood are also characters in a lot of X-Men stories when you get into the cosmic X-Men stuff. But at the same time this was made, Marvel Studios was also making X-Men comics. So I don't know. Maybe not. Yeah. I don't know. And it also, I think, could have just been cast out because we've got enough aliens to learn in a 15-minute span before the action gets rolling here. So maybe it was just superfluous in that sense. But it's an interesting character in the books. So yeah, I didn't think it was critical loss, but it is what it is.
All right, let's get into the moving panels. So let's give a little background. This was a run within the Incredible Hulk. This wasn't a one-shot. This wasn't a separate graphic novel. This was within the canon of the Incredible Hulk. It was issues 92 through 105. But prior to this story was a storyline called Peace in Our Time. And I won't get into that in great detail, but it ends with Hulk being the one who has to stop the main villain called God's Eye, and he's on the moon. He battles off because he's the only one who's strong enough to stop God's Eye. He stops God's Eye. There's a shuttle from S.H.I.E.L.D. that arrives to take Hulk back to Earth, so he thinks, and then the shuttle ends up taking him further into space. And so that's where we get the opening of this movie, where you see Hulk wake up inside the ship, and he's getting the message from the Illuminati. That is what they are called in the comics, where he's getting the message from the Illuminati explaining why they decided to send him off to what they believe was going to be a uninhabited, peaceful, tranquil planet almost visualized where Thanos ended up after Infinity War.
Yeah.
Just this quiet little planet that Hulk would just be able to live out the rest of his life and not be a danger to anyone. And then, of course, Hulk goes crazy. He smashes up the navigation system. There happens to be a wormhole. And he ends up...
why not?
Yeah, he ends up on Sakaar.
Well, I think, just to back up slightly, I think it's cool to point out how these stories tie into the arch that was going on at Marvel at the time. And so, going into Civil War, the writers have a problem. And they know that whoever has Thor and or Hulk has a massive advantage in just the mechanics of how are you going to defeat that hero when it comes down to Civil War. Because, Iron Man and Captain America are fairly well matched. And so you just kind of go down the list of Marvel characters and there's matchups. So they wrote Thor out with the Thor Odinson storyline, which is also a super great read. And then they did this to the Hulk. And so it's pretty slick, and they make no bones about it in the movie. I think they even kind of reference that that things are getting bad on Earth, and he can't be there. He's just a force of destruction and all this kind of stuff. You were talking about the Illuminati, and I wanted to touch, is Black Bolt in that shot? I didn't even think to look for it, because it's Reed Richards, Black Bolt, Tony Stark, Hank Pym. Who else is...
And Doctor Strange, one of them?
Yes. That's the main characters of the Illuminati. And I think I remember seeing all of them but Black Bolt. But
yeah, I was about to say, I don't think all of them that are technically the Illuminati are in the shot in the movie. Black Bolt may be the one that's missing. I can't remember either, to be honest.
Yeah, sorry. A little bit of a tangent, but...
You're fine. No, I was going to bring up the Civil War thing. This was in the comics, the way to get rid of Hulk while Civil War was going on. Again, we'll get into this in a minute. Didn't work out too well for them. But so they could do the Civil War storyline. Yeah, you can't have Hulk, you can't have Thor. And then, of course, in the movies, they did the same thing. They had Thor go off on his journey after he had his little vision quest or whatnot in Age of Ultron. You had him go off, and then they get rid of Hulk, even though they don't quite mention how. But then, of course, you find out in Thor Ragnarok that he's on Sakaar, and we get that whole story.
Yeah, so... Man, I really don't want to beat up on the movie, because I really enjoy the movie a lot.
Oh, it's a good... Yeah,
but... one of its shortcomings in how they have to condense it is that it's really only 2/3 of the book to begin with.
Yeah, so like I said, the Planet Hulk storyline is issues 92 through 105, but the movie stops at about issue 102. Right. So there's still 3 more issues of story of what happens on Sakaar.
Yeah, it's a lot of stuff that goes down. But even kind of in the beginning of it, this story... The reason I like Planet Hulk so much is it took a fairly kind of one-dimensional character. I mean, the Hulk is not exactly known for deep, meaningful story runs. You get some stuff every now and then with the play with Banner and all that sort of stuff. But I feel like Greg Pak did a great job of pointing out just Hulk's loneliness. He really humanized him a lot in this that you never saw before. And you see... kind of that, like, I can almost hear the theme song to the old TV show Hulk, is it just the sad outro,
man,
and so I kind of that
dun 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 dun.
So it's just that sort of thing, but they really double down on it in this comic run, and it's so deep and meaningful, just how much alone this guy is. And so for the first time, he gets a family.
Well, before you get into that, going into his ability to trust, because here he had been fighting for Earth, he had been an Avenger, and here he was, he trusted that S.H.I.E.L.D. was going to bring him back home, and then he's betrayed by the people he thought were his friends.
Yeah.
And so they get into, and the movie shows it a little bit too, that he just like, nope, I just want to do what I'm doing and get out of here.
Yep.
He didn't want to team up. He didn't want to make friends. But like you're saying, he ultimately develops a family in this storyline.
Yeah, they definitely have a kind of Guardians of the Galaxy moment where it's this total hodgepodge of people that shouldn't get along from, all kind of different ethnic backgrounds and all that sort of stuff that are driven into becoming a team. And so you miss out in the movie on the full arc of that, though. Because in the last episodes, after the Red King has been defeated and, yay, everything's on top, and Hulk becomes king of Sakaar, replacing the Red King as emperor. He decides to make everyone equals. He's doing all these great things, and Kyara is his queen, and then Meek, in his hurt and everything from basically the extinction of his people coming up, betrays them all and brings the downfall of Sakaar. It results in the death of Hulk's now wife, and she dies.
Child.
Yeah, so it's a heartbreaking read. Coming from you're seeing a dude who just finally is patching himself up from, like you're saying, the betrayal of his friends, all this sort of stuff, and just gutted, which leads into a phenomenal book series. So it's coming full circle back to the Marvel universe. Mm-hmm. You have the heroes on Earth who are in turmoil from, trying to patch up the wounds and everything from Civil War and come back together and, all this kind of stuff. And now the Hulk shows up to destroy them. And it's a magnificent comic book run. Just the idea that Hulk almost single-handedly can take on virtually all of Earth's heroes. It's pretty cool. I won't ruin that one for anybody who does want to read through them.
Yeah.
But I think that's probably where the movie does kind of shortchange you a little bit. I can understand them not wanting it to end it on a bad note, but how awesome would it have been if they had went dark and kind of forced the studio to let them make World War Hulk as well. But I don't know. So maybe I'm going to start that hashtag, release World War Hulk cut. I don't know. But
yeah. I love in the comic run, not only do you have him really developing a family and finding a home and all that, but even just the aspects of, like with the, I forgot the name of the aliens, but the ones that they end up using Hulk to suck out his life force, because that's what keeps them alive, and he does it long enough for them to get their affairs in order so that they can leave.
The Spikes, yeah.
And the Spikes, yeah.
Yep.
I forgot if they gave them an actual name. But yeah, the Spikes, and then...
Yeah, you find out that they're not just zombie makers, that they're this being that requires a ton of power, and the Red King has been using them and all this kind of stuff, and Hulk makes all that right. It's actually really... I don't know. I don't want to geek out on it too much, even though it's a nerd podcast. But it's it's really a cool story in this whole redemptive arc that Hulk becomes this... he's been told that he's this force of destruction. We've got to get rid of you because all you do is destroy things. And here he's nothing but a redemptive force. And of course it's part of the prophetic stuff, but it's explained in science the way Marvel likes to do that kind of stuff. But, part of the prophecy he fulfills is that his blood literally causes the world to come back to life there. There's very little plant life and that sort of thing. And so where his blood falls, because of the gamma energy in it and everything, it actually restores plant life and things start to grow and all this sort of thing. And so you get this like great redemptive arc, and man, it just makes it that much more crushing at the end, because he's doing everything from literally redeeming a planet. He's redeemed an entire species and set them free and set them back out into the universe. He's patched up this kind of triad of species on Sakaar and is making them equals and respect one another again, and then the whole thing just gets wiped out and he loses it hardcore.
Oh yeah, I mean, but you don't blame him.
No,
that's the thing about it.
Yep.
You do not blame him at all. And again, we won't spoil World War Hulk since this movie doesn't actually cover it, but when Earth's heroes are trying to speak to him and whatnot, he's telling them, look, this is what you did. Like, you brought this upon yourself, and
they even understand that to a point. Like you see Doctor Strange, Reed, several of them just kind of coming to plead with Hulk that we just were doing what we thought we had to do. Like we knew it was wrong, but it was a lesser of two evils kind of thing, and so it's really compelling.
Yeah, and then he just proceeds to.
Oh man,
yeah. Like I said, we won't get into that, but it's a great read, as Chad's saying. Like I said, this was my first time actually reading through it. And I not only read through Planet Hulk, but I kept going.
Yeah.
And I read through World War Hulk, and it was, great read.
But I also just enjoy that it's not a one-off. This isn't some elsewhere story. This is a main line. This happened in Hulk's main run in the comics. So it's pretty cool.
Yeah. Greg Pak, like you said, did a phenomenal job.
Oh, and the artwork. Oh my gosh. The movie is a good-looking movie. They did a good job of capturing a lot of it, but man, it just pales in comparison to the books. And I really should have done my homework and written the artists down, but I didn't write artists or colorers or anybody. But they did a phenomenal job. It's in the animation. You kind of understand that you're not going to get that level of detail and everything in an animated movie, but man, like the Red King's armor and just the cover, and it's I'm sure we'll cover this a little bit later, but it a lot of the visuals you see in Ragnarok come straight from that artwork.
So I looked it up real quick so we could give them their nod. So the pencilers were Carlo Pagulayan and Aaron Lopresti. Inker was Jeffrey Hewitt. Colorist was Chris Sotomayor.
Great job, guys.
So there you go. Yeah. All right, just some fun little trivia aspects when you're watching the movie. Look in the crowd. The animators decided to throw in Star-Lord, Gamora, Pip the Troll, and even Adam Warlock are just sitting in the crowd watching all this happening.
And you got to remember, this is pre-MCU, so if you're looking for those things, Google comic book Gamora first, because she doesn't look much.
She'll just look a little different, yeah.
Her bizarre entire body fishnet costume thing she wears, and yeah. But yeah, the Guardians are apparently, they like to come down to Sakaar to enjoy a good time watching some gladiatorial battles. So.
But I also found it funny that there is a scene where you can see behind the Red King, you can see the Grandmaster.
Yeah.
Which is so funny considering that in Thor Ragnarok, the Grandmaster replaces the Red King.
Yep.
So I found that funny.
Yeah.
All right, so let's get into our final decisions. On this podcast, we call it Bag It, Stack It, or Trade It, the way you treat a comic book. But we're talking about the movie. Chad, the movie for Planet Hulk, do you bag it, stack it, or trade it?
Man, I'm extremely biased on this one, and Laramy actually introduced me to this movie. He knew that I was a Marvel fan. I had read the books a long time ago, and well before the days of everything being at your fingertips streaming, Laramy was like, you should check this out. You need to go find it somewhere. And so I'm probably biased and nostalgic in that sense, but it is for sure a bag it for me. I have a special place in my heart for this storyline, the run, and this movie.
Yeah, I'm a bag it too. Like Chad said, this was one, I didn't even know the comic. Again, I didn't read the comic until I was prepping for this show. I was familiar that it existed. I saw this movie without knowing anything about the comic, and I enjoyed it. And like we talked about earlier, this was probably one of the best animated movies Marvel had put out at the time. And it honestly did make me want to know more about the storyline. And so it was kind of a treat to then go through and read it and find out just how much deeper that story went. Sure, the movie could have been longer. It could have covered more of the story, but for the hour and 20-minute animated movie that it was a decent adaptation, in my opinion.
And if you haven't read it, you really should find the run. It's not a long read at all. I mean, you can pass through it pretty quickly, but it's a good one.
And I know it's been a decade now since they put this out, so it probably won't happen, but I would love for them to do the World War Hulk as a sequel.
Oh man.
I mean, DC has done a good job of, continuing on. Like pretty much they make their movies feel like separate movies, but then they're actual continuations of the animated movie that came prior. Like DC does that. And so
yeah, better than their, cinematic universe.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it's crazy that DC's better with animated stuff.
Oh, 100%.
Marvel's better with live with live action stuff, unless you're talking TV versus movie. DC's better with TV than Marvel, but again, Marvel reigns in terms of motion pictures.
Yeah,
so.
No, it's very interesting.
All right, Chad, any last words? Anything else you want to share about Planet Hulk?
No, I mean, just watch Hulk smash some stuff. It's very cathartic. It's great. So.
Always is. All right, well, thanks. Give us a follow on social media. Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, @MovingPanels. I'm on TikTok, @MovingPanels. I try to get content out as much as I can. TikTok's a crazy beast. I'll post a video one day and get 20,000 views. I'll post a video another day and I get 200. So I don't get it, but I'm on there. But if you got anything you want to share with us, you, of course, can hit us up on any of those platforms as well as email us, movingpanels@gmail.com. But for today's episode, I just want to thank Chad once again. It's always great to have these conversations to almost 40-year-old nerds talking about movies and comic books. So thanks, Chad.
Yeah, I mean, we've only been doing this for 20 years, so.
There you go. All right, for Moving Panels, I'm Laramy Wells, and I'll see you on the other side of the page.
Hello movie viewers and fellow movie lovers. My name is Tim Williams and I'm the creator and host of Movie Views Presents the 80s Flick Flashback Podcast. See, I love the 80s and I have a great appreciation and nostalgic passion for the classic 80s flicks that birthed my love for movies and ultimately helped shape my childhood. On each episode, I'll discuss, with a special guest co-host of course, a different film from the 1980s. We'll share memories, favorite characters, iconic scenes, and even share some behind-the-scenes stories along the way. We'll discuss famous blockbusters like Raiders of the Lost Ark, Coming to America, Ghostbusters, Dirty Dancing, Top Gun, Die Hard, and many, many more. As well as some other cult classics and even lesser-known flicks we discovered on cable TV or the now-defunct video rental stores. Remember those? No matter what 80s flick we choose to talk about, we'll always have a good time, so come and check us out. You can find the 80s Flick Flashback Podcast on major podcasting platforms like Apple Podcast, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Anchor, and more. Be sure to subscribe or follow so you don't miss a single episode. Once again, I'm Tim Williams, and I hope you'll join me for the next 80s Flick Flashback.